Hello and welcome back to the Deep Dive. It is Friday, February 20th, 2026. And honestly, if you blinked this morning, you probably missed a constitutional crisis,
A massive market rally.
right, and a market crash,
Uh,
all before you even finished your first cup of coffee. It's just been absolute chaos in Washington and on Wall Street today.
Chaos might actually be an understatement here.
Yeah.
We are looking at a historic, really a fundamental struggle between the judicial branch and the executive branch over who actually holds the keys to the U.S. economy.
Yeah.
And the markets are just whipping back and forth trying to make sense of it all.
Yeah, usually on a Friday we're winding down, maybe looking at a lighter topic. But today we have a Supreme Court ruling that shook the entire foundation of our trade policy.
Followed immediately by a presidential countermove.
Right, which gave everyone absolute legal whiplash. So what is our mission today? What are we looking at?
We have a lot of sources today and three main layers to get through. First, we have to unpack this legal battle, the Supreme Court versus the White House, because the mechanics of it matter way more than the headlines.
Okay.
Second, we need to look at the crypto markets. We've got research from Dr. Kirill Kretov, plus analysis from Omid Malakin and Zach Pandal, showing that Bitcoin is reacting in a way that suggests something fundamental is shifting.
Like in the global financial plumbing.
Exactly. And third, we have to do the math. We've got a working paper from the Peterson Institute for International Economics, the PIIE. We need to look at the hard economic reality of the proposal to replace the income tax with tariffs.
Because when you actually run those numbers, let's just say the math is startling.
Very.
All right, let's dive right in. Layer 1, the legal whiplash. The case is Learning Resources v. Trump. The Supreme Court dropped a 6-3 decision today. What exactly did they say?
Essentially, the court said stop. They ruled that the president could not use IEEPA, that's the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, to impose these broad, sweeping tariffs we've been living with.
Okay, let's pause on IEPA for a second. That sounds like something you'd use for, I don't know, stopping money laundering for terrorists, right?
Precisely. IEPA is designed for national emergencies, sanctioning rogue states, freezing assets of drug cartels.
Right.
It gives the president immense power. And the administration had been using it to say, well, the trade deficit is a national emergency, so I can set tariffs however I want.
And the court pushed back.
The court today said no.
Mm-hmm.
Trade policy is Congress's job, not yours. You cannot use emergency powers to effectively rewrite the tax code.
And the market absolutely loved hearing that.
Well, they loved it for about 3 hours.
Yeah.
The Dow, the NASDAQ, the S&P 500, they all rallied hard. The assumption was that the effective U.S. tariff rate, which had hit 17.5%.
Which is the highest since 1935, by the way.
Right, the highest since 1935. Everyone thought that rate was about to drop. Free trade was back on the menu. Yields on 10-year and 30-year treasuries even rose slightly because people were a bit concerned about the federal deficit without that tariff revenue.
But then, and here's the plot twist, the press conference happens. Because Trump didn't just say, all right, my bad.
Not even close. He called the ruling deeply disappointing, claimed other statutes are even stronger, and immediately pulled a completely different law out of the toolkit.
Which one?
He activated Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974.
Okay, so he swaps one law for another. He's imposing a new 10% global tariff effective in 3 days. Plus, he's keeping the national security tariffs under Section 232 active. But help me understand the strategy here. If the Supreme Court just said, you can't do this, how can he just use a different law to do the exact same thing?
That is the million-dollar question today. The difference is the constraints. IEPA, the Emergency Powers Act, is theoretically indefinite.
You declare an emergency and it just lasts.
Right, it lasts until you say it's over. Section 122 is different. It's designed specifically for a balance of payments crisis. But here is the massive catch. It has a strict time limit.
A time limit?
Yes,
Yeah.
150 days, 5 months.
Oh, wow, that changes the timeline completely.
Drastically. Under IEPA, he could have kept this going for his entire term. Under Section 122, he has 5 months before he legally has to go to Congress and ask for permission to extend it.
So he basically just bought himself 5 months, which means we aren't resolving the trade war today. We are just setting a timer on a massive political showdown in Congress later this year.
Exactly. So the net result for your wallet, prices are staying up, uncertainty is staying high. But legally, the ground has completely shifted beneath our feet.
Which totally explains why that market rally fizzled out by lunch. Investors realized this wasn't over.
Not by a long shot.
But speaking of investors, let's talk about the one asset class that seems to be partying regardless of the legal drama, Bitcoin.
Yeah, this has been fascinating to watch unfold.
So Bitcoin jumped from around $67,000 right after the Supreme Court news dropped. And it brings up this identity crisis debate I keep hearing in the sources. Is crypto a risk asset like a tech stock that thrives on good news and economic growth? Or is it a safe haven hedge like digital gold that loves chaos?
It really is an identity crisis. Traditionally, Wall Street treats crypto exactly like a tech stock. Tariffs are bad for growth, so if tariffs go up, you sell your tech stocks and you sell your crypto. That's the classic risk-off view.
But that is not what happened today.
No, it's not. Today, we saw the digital gold narrative take the wheel. We have analysis here from Omid Malikan at Columbia Business School and Zach Pandal from Grayscale. They argue that these tariffs are actually bullish for Bitcoin because they weaken the U.S. dollar's dominance.
Okay, walk me through that. How does a tariff weaken the dollar? I thought the whole point was to make the dollar stronger by fixing the trade deficit.
In theory, yes. But in practice, if the U.S. becomes highly isolationist and global trade becomes difficult, the rest of the world starts looking for workarounds. If the dollar is heavily weaponized through trade wars, its status as the global reserve currency, the thing everyone absolutely has to hold, starts to erode.
Right, and if you can't trust the dollar or you can't access it easily.
You look for a global monetary asset that no single president or country controls. That's the Bitcoin pitch. Pandal explicitly noted his conviction in Bitcoin is higher now because this administration seems so determined to disrupt global trade.
Okay, but there's another layer to this price action, right?
Yeah.
We have this research from Dr. Kirill Kretov predicting Bitcoin could actually hit $150,000. That's a massive number. Is that just hype, or is there actual data behind that?
There is data, but it's a supply-side argument. Kretov isn't looking at market sentiment or politics. He's looking at the actual plumbing of the blockchain. He points to a massive liquidity reduction.
Liquidity reduction. Let's break that down for people.
Think of the Bitcoin market as a giant swimming pool. The liquidity is the water in the pool. Kretov's data shows that recently, massive amounts of Bitcoin, we're talking huge blocks of 100 to 10,000 BTC, have been pulled out of the pool.
So they're being taken off public exchanges and moved to private cold storage.
Exactly. The whales, the big institutional holders, are draining the pool. They are holding, not selling. So now the water level is incredibly low.
Yes.
When the water is that low, even a small splash, a little bit of new buying interest from a headline like today's Supreme Court ruling creates a massive wave in the price.
That makes total sense. So the price shoots up not because millions of people are suddenly buying, but because nobody is selling.
It's a classic liquidity crunch.
Yeah.
Kresov argues this mechanical shortage could push the price toward $150,000 simply because there aren't enough liquid coins to satisfy even moderate demand.
But wait a second, doesn't a shallow pool work both ways?
You hit the nail on the head. That is the danger here. Kretov explicitly warns that low liquidity markets are incredibly unstable. If panic sets in and those whales do start selling, the price can crash just as violently as it spiked.
Right.
Plus, we have to look at history. March 2025 saw Bitcoin trend downward alongside broader economic unease. So if you are looking at Bitcoin as a safe haven today, just be careful. It behaves a lot more like a highly volatile hedge than a steady savings account.
Okay, so Bitcoin is the volatile hedge. But there is another crypto angle in our sources today that I found completely mind-blowing. And honestly, it's a connection I would never have made on my own. It's from the piece by Joachim Klemen on investing.
Oh, the stablecoin connection.
Yes.
This is one of those real aha moments where you realize how interconnected the global economy actually is.
So the stated goal of tariffs is to reduce the U.S. trade deficit, which means we Americans buy fewer foreign goods, so we send fewer dollars abroad.
Right.
So naturally, there are fewer dollars floating around in the global economy. It creates a dollar shortage.
Correct. Now, put yourself in the shoes of a business owner or a saver in a developing nation, let's say Argentina or Turkey. Your local currency is highly inflationary. You need U.S. dollars to survive, to protect your savings, to do international business.
Usually I just go to my local bank and exchange my pesos or lira for dollars.
If you can. But in many of these countries, the government enforces capital controls. They strictly restrict how many dollars you can legally buy because the central bank is running out of dollars too.
Right.
Now, imagine U.S. tariffs hit hard. The flow of dollars into your country dries up even more. The government tightens the capital controls even further. You literally cannot get dollars at the bank anymore.
So I'm just stuck. My savings just inflate away.
Not anymore. Now, you pull out your smartphone, you download digital wallet, and you buy USDT or USDC.
Dollar-denominated stablecoins.
Exactly.
So the tariffs, which are meant to protect the domestic U.S. economy, are actually forcing regular people in emerging markets to bypass their own banks and jump into crypto stablecoins just to get indirect exposure to the dollar.
That is the ultimate irony here. Clement points out that major tariff announcements in the past have directly correlated with surges in stablecoin demand in countries with strict capital controls.
That is wild. We are effectively running a massive, unintentional marketing campaign for Tether and Circle.
And with the Genius Act, which was mentioned in Clement's analysis, establishing a formal legal framework for stablecoins in the U.S., we might be accidentally accelerating this entire trend.
Yeah.
We could be pushing the developing world onto a blockchain-based dollar standard way faster than any intentional tech innovation ever could.
We are digitizing the dollar by accident.
By accident or by sheer necessity. It's the law of unintended consequences playing out in real time.
Speaking of unintended consequences, we really have to pivot back to the domestic economy. Because all of this, the tariffs, the emergency acts, the trade laws, it is all building towards a much bigger proposal we keep hearing about from the administration, the idea of completely replacing the federal income tax with tariffs.
This is the big one. We've heard Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick suggest it. The president has floated it repeatedly. The elevator pitch is simple. Abolish the personal income tax and just fund the entire government with tariffs.
I mean, it sounds amazing on a bumper sticker. No more income tax. Who wouldn't want that? But we have this working paper from the Peterson Institute, the PIE, that actually sat down and ran the math. And the results are, well, they don't look good.
Doesn't look good, is putting it very mildly. The math is functionally impossible.
Okay, prove it. Give us the numbers.
All right, let's look at the baseline. Currently, the federal personal income tax generates about $2.4 trillion a year.
$2.4 trillion. Got it.
Now, let's look at tariffs as a replacement. You might logically think, oh, we'll just keep raising the tariff rate until we hit that $2.4 trillion mark. But economically, you can't do that.
Why not? Just tax them more.
Because of a concept called the tariff Laffer curve. Think about it. If you tax imported goods at 1%, you make some money. If you tax them at 10%, you make more money. But what happens if you tax them at 100%?
Nobody imports anything. It's too expensive.
Exactly. Trade drops to zero. And you collect 100% of nothing.
Right.
So there is a revenue maximizing rate, a peak of the curve. The Peterson Institute models show that this peak, the absolute highest amount of money you can squeeze out of tariffs, occurs somewhere between a 32% and 53% tariff rate, depending on the model you use.
Okay, so if we hit that peak, if we squeeze the global trade limit as hard as we possibly can, how much money does the government actually get?
At the absolute maximum, estimates range from roughly $370 billion to $540 billion annually.
Wait, hold on. You just said we need $2.4 trillion to replace the income tax, and the most we can mathematically get from tariffs is maybe $540 billion?
That's right.
That's not a gap. That's a canyon. We are talking about nearly a $2 trillion hole in the federal budget every single year.
Correct. You'd have to cut the federal budget by massive, unprecedented amounts to make the math work. Or you'd have to find a huge new source of revenue somewhere else. You simply cannot fund the current U.S. government on tariffs alone. It is not a political opinion. It's just arithmetic.
But it gets worse than just a budget shortfall, doesn't it? The PIIE paper also talks about deadweight loss, which sounds like a terrible heavy metal band, but I'm assuming it's an economic term.
It is, and it's a crucial one. Deadweight loss is basically money that just evaporates from the economy. It's pure inefficiency.
Give me a real-world example so I can visualize this.
Okay, let's say you need to buy a toaster. An imported toaster from Vietnam costs $30. An American-made toaster costs $50. In a free market without tariffs, you buy the $30 one, you save $20, which you then spend on groceries or put in your savings account.
Right, simple enough.
Now, the government slaps a massive tariff on the Vietnamese toaster, making it cost $60. So you go to the store and you logically buy the American one for $50.
Okay, so I bought the American toaster. Isn't that the whole point of the tariff? To support domestic manufacturing?
You bought American, yes, but you spent $50 instead of $30.
Yeah.
You're now $20 poorer. But here's the real kicker. The government didn't get that $20 either.
Because I didn't buy the imported one, so no tariff was actually paid.
Exactly. The government collected zero tariff revenue from you. That $20 didn't go to fund a school or build a road or offset your tax cut. It just vanished into the economic inefficiency of producing a more expensive toaster domestically. That evaporated value is deadweight loss.
Wow. So the economy as a whole just destroys its own wealth.
Yes. The study suggests that at high tariff rates, like 20% or more for every single dollar of revenue the government actually manages to collect, the economy suffers about 33 cents of deadweight loss. It's a remarkably terrible return on investment for the country. And the estimates show this could cost the average household over $3,300 in additional costs every year.
And who really pays that $3,300? I mean, the administration always says foreign countries pay the tariffs. Economists usually say the domestic importers pay it. But eventually, it's just me at the checkout line, right?
It is you, but it hits some people much harder than others. This brings us to the regressive nature of consumption taxes, like tariffs.
Explain how that regressivity works for the listener.
Think about an average household budget. If you are making, say, $40,000 a year, almost every single dollar you earn goes straight to surviving. You buy food, clothes, gas, basic electronics. You are spending nearly 100% of your income on goods.
Unfortunately true for a lot of people.
So if everything you buy has a tariff baked into the price, you are effectively paying a tax on 100% of your income.
Right.
Now compare that to someone making $5 million a year. They spend a lot, sure, but they save and invest a huge chunk of their money in stocks, real estate, bonds. They aren't buying $4 million worth of toasters and blue jeans every year.
So the wealthy person avoids the tariff tax on the majority of their income because they aren't spending it on physical goods.
Exactly. The PIIE data is very clear on this. The bottom quintile of earners gets hit the hardest. Shifting from an income tax, which is generally progressive, meaning wealthier people pay a higher percentage, to a tariff system, effectively transfers the national tax burden away from the wealthy and dumps it onto the working and middle classes.
That is a really tough pill to swallow. Less total government revenue, massive economic waste, and lower income families end up paying more.
Yes.
So why do politicians keep pushing this? Is there any macroeconomic argument for tariffs that actually holds water?
The primary argument is always about protecting domestic industry.
Yeah.
We need to make our own steel, build our own cars. But this completely ignores another fundamental rule of economics called learner symmetry.
Learner symmetry. Break that down for us.
It basically states that a tax on imports acts exactly like a tax on exports.
Wait, how does that work? If I put a tariff on a Chinese electric vehicle, how does that hurt an American farmer trying to export soybeans?
In two major ways. First is direct retaliation. We saw this play out in 2018 and 2019. We taxed foreign steel and aluminum. China immediately retaliated by canceling orders for U.S. soybeans and pork.
And the government had to step in, right?
Huge bailouts. The U.S. government had to pay billions in subsidies to farmers to make up for those lost export markets. And those bailout payments basically canceled out the revenue we were collecting from the tariffs in the first place.
But retaliation is just politics. What's the economic mechanism of learner symmetry?
The second way is more subtle and structural. If you protect domestic steel with a tariff, the price of steel inside the U.S. goes up. Now think about an American manufacturing company like Caterpillar or Boeing that buys that steel to build tractors or airplanes that they export around the world.
Their raw material costs just spiked.
Exactly. They are now paying more to build their products, which makes them less competitive in the global market compared to a European or Asian company buying cheaper, non-tariff steel.
So by protecting the domestic steel mill, you directly hurt the domestic manufacturer who uses the steel.
Precisely. You aren't actually creating net new jobs or fixing the trade deficit. You're just reshuffling resources from your efficient export industries over to your less efficient protected industries. And in the process, you shrink the total volume of trade.
It's a negative supply shock.
Exactly. It raises consumer prices, causing inflation, while simultaneously lowering overall economic activity and growth.
Which is the exact recipe for stagflation.
Yes. And with China and Canada having already retaliated in 2025, and the EU, Mexico, and Brazil currently threatening action over Section 122, the risk of a global stagflationary environment is very real.
So let's zoom out here. We have covered a lot of dense ground today. We have a legal system in total chaos, with the White House switching from emergency powers to 1970s trade acts just to keep these tariffs alive.
Right.
We have a crypto market that is essentially betting on the weaponization and weakening of the U.S. dollar. And we have a sweeping economic proposal that mathematically would blow a $2 trillion hole in the budget and shift the tax burden onto the working class.
It is a moment of extreme historic uncertainty. And if there's one thing businesses hate more than taxes, it's uncertainty. If you are a CEO and you don't know if your supply chain costs are going to jump 10% next week, or if the Supreme Court is going to strike down a law, or if Congress is going to intervene in 5 months,
You just freeze.
you freeze. You don't invest in new equipment. You don't hire new workers. You just wait. And that waiting is what grinds the broader economy to a halt.
It really highlights why we do these deep dives. A headline about a Supreme Court case isn't just about lawyers in robes arguing over jurisdiction. It's about the price of your groceries, the value of your 401k, and whether your company decides to hire or fire next year.
Absolutely. And if I can leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought to mull over based on all these sources,
Please do.
go back to that stablecoin connection Joachim Clement brought up.
Right.
We almost always think of tariffs as a blunt tool to protect the old economy. Steel mills, factories, physical goods.
Right. 20th century industries.
But if Clement and the researchers are right, the biggest, longest-lasting impact of this trade war might actually be on the new economy.
How so?
If the U.S. intentionally constrains the traditional flow of physical dollars around the globe, are we inadvertently pushing the rest of the world to adopt alternative digital currencies faster than any Silicon Valley tech innovation ever could on its own?
Oh, wow. So we might be trying to build a protective wall around the U.S. economy, but in doing so, we're actually forcing everyone else to build a bridge to a post-dollar financial future.
It is entirely possible. So don't just watch the traditional trade deficit numbers or the stock ticker. Watch the stablecoin volume in emerging markets, because that might be where the real financial history is being written right now.
Well, on that fascinating note, we are going to wrap up our analysis for today. Keep a very close eye on Section 122. The clock is officially ticking on that 5-month deadline.
And as always, make sure you check your sources, look at the underlying data, and do not just read the headlines.
Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive. We'll catch you next time.